Record progress.
Okay. Hello. Today is February 19th, 2024. So today we're going to be continuing with the Tangle of Science. I don't know if I have anything else to say. I am just finishing cleaning with my new room, and I'm probably going to be going to Seattle soon. So they want me to move to Bellevue because they don't think the police are any better in Seattle than they are in Linwood, which from the looks of it is probably true. It's pretty tragic that people are recommending other people not to live somewhere because of the police, but it's not the first time I lived somewhere that had that issue. So we are going to move on because we have to get through about another fifth of the Tangle of Science. Okay. So all the tabs that I have open are to do with calculus comprehension. I'm finally, hopefully, going to long-term develop the calculus curriculum that I needed when I was 16 or 17. And it's going to be based on research. So it's a lot of research tabs, but that's what that is. And let's go to the reading. Okay. So right now we are talking about representational theory of measurement. According to representational theory of measurement, a good measured needs plus the defense that the three are appropriate to each other. So a characterization of the concept to be measured, a formal representation of it as in a table or of indicators or an index, and procedures for assigning values to items measured. Okay. So I'm going to continue. We have Martha Nussbaum. She was also a feminist, somewhat, read some of her stuff. They're talking about utility. So this is key. The procedures are reliable for ascertaining what values that concept takes in the systems that are measured. I don't know why the highlight is being bad, but it just means that what values that concept takes in the systems that are measured. Essentially, how does this fit into the configuration of, I guess you can think of it as the lock of the system. So we keep going. We do talk about capabilitarian well-being. So here they're talking about human development. They're talking about the deprivation model. And they're just saying that the procedures specified for those will find out what they are supposed to do, despite the fact that they provide total orderings. Those procedures are not warranted as reliable for assessing the capability and well-being of individuals or populations that they are supposed to measure. Kind of like a uniformity argument, essentially saying, sometimes we don't have the measurement to do what we need to do. So we continue to talk about the consumer price index, estimating the average increase in price of designated goods, basket of goods across all the places the goods are available for purchase in the USA. But as Julian Rice, I don't know how to say it, suggests not ensuring the veterans' benefits can ensure that the same standard of living from year to year, because veterans living on benefits often have little access to large suburban outlets where prices are cheaper and whose prices bring down the CPI. So essentially what they're just saying there is, there's a lot of factors we can't see, like where veterans can even shop. Like that's not something we can necessarily see right away. Okay, so what do we mean by something's reliability being good? That's pretty vague. And we keep going. Reliability claims lack genuine content because the targeted purposes are unspecified. This creates a danger of inference by false ascent from concrete to the abstract. This happens when you have good reasons to back the reliability of an item for a particular concrete purpose. Okay. But then describe the purpose at a more abstract level. So we start with saying the consumer price index for the average price of goods in a basket, but then we end up with CPI. So they're saying that's inference from false ascent, because you have good reasons to back up the reliability of these designated goods in a basket, but that doesn't really apply for measuring inflation. Okay, so it's not reliable. A basket's price is not reliable for huge systems of information. So this is now going to talk about the Van Jont Dam disaster, which we discuss in more detail, but they're just giving us the beginning of it. Engineers had focused on whether the dam built as planned would stand against a range of onslaughts, and also on whether the surrounding stone would support it. It seems that it was implicitly supposed, wrongly, that a yes answer implied that human lives in the area would be safe in the face of those onslaughts. So they relied on a well-supported general inference about the rock. Overall, limestone is honest because it reveals its flaws on the surface. So what they knew about a generic form of the principle didn't apply to a larger application. And that's another thing that we need to talk about in science, is applications are not always as strong as we think they are. We offered 5 arguments here for the need to focus from truth to reliability. 1, understanding of what a claim amounts to in a given setting can be true, another not so. What's needed then is warrant that one version rather than another can be relied on in that setting to do the job needed there. Reliable for what they ask. It is reliability that matters, we argue, even when it comes to claims and theories. And good scientific methods are essential for securing reliability. So the study of scientific method is hugely important, so long as that involves studying what should go on in science to make each and every one of its products with no privileged preconceptions onto the jobs they are relied on to do. So that key one is so long as that involves studying what should go on in science. And that was taking apart, for instance, like, are the measures we have to measure what we want to measure doing their job as they were presupposed to do. So we keep going, keep going. Now we're going to talk about rigor. So this chapter will look at typical calls for rigor in science and try to identify what is meant by rigor. So we shall focus for illustration on the biomedical and social sciences on the use of rigorous evidence and policy. And then we have the randomized control trial. Rigor can't do much in securing the reliability of the vast panoply of scientific products we depend on. Sorry, I've been packing and cleaning, so I'm rather tired. And then, especially in our sample cases of establishing causal conclusions, some distinctions involve formal rigor, substantive rigor, and rigor with certifiable inputs. Okay, so formal rigor is going to be, and we'll probably talk about these, but I believe that is your logical excellence, like your symbolic excellence, and then substantive rigor, I believe, means that it actually refers to things that are correct references. I don't know if that's exactly what they mean, but we will find out. And then rigor with certifiable inputs. Maybe functional, I don't know. I'm not quite sure about that. So we're going to keep going. A recent methodology for reasonably reliably warranting causal explanations and predictions about places not studied, though decidedly not rigorously. So this is RCTS, okay? So they're talking about how we derive causality, and that is why we like science. It's kind of like in the court system, you have preponderance of the evidence, and we also have beyond reasonable doubt. Preponderance of the evidence, yeah, you can get away with not really having looked at it. But beyond a reasonable doubt is it needs stronger evidence. So if you have strong evidence, you should get beyond a reasonable doubt. If you have sort of strong evidence, you should get preponderance. If you don't at least get preponderance, you probably have corrupt judge. And I've dealt with that, where you have just like tons of evidence and they just, even with preponderance, are saying, oh, you know, that's not enough. So yeah, preponderance is the lighter standard. So if you have tons of evidence and it's not even getting preponderance, you got a corrupt or incompetent judge. So this one is kind of like preponderance, and rigor would be beyond a reasonable doubt. So setting the agenda, clearly much of what science does is reliable, but what secures that reliability, okay? one answer, a standard part of an answer, is that the outputs of science, devices, theories, measures, and the rest are reliable because they are the result of rigorous processes. Okay, so what does that mean? It's kind of like circular. It's like it's reliable because it's rigorous. What unites scientific inquiry is the primacy of an empirical test of conjectures and formal hypotheses using well-codified observation measures and rigorous designs and subjecting findings to peer review. I would say this part is the key. Peer review is your checks and balances to your findings, and trying to evade peer review it's bad science. So trying to evade checks and balances is bad science. The extent to which the inferences that are made in the course of scientific work are warranted depends on rigorous reasoning. That's from the United States, but the view is no way particular to the USA. So we talk about more rigor, there's more there. So they're saying that rigor can mean that I am relying on procedural rules. And it's one of our usual suspects behind reliability that they want to concentrate on. But it's seen here by its ability through procedure to secure objectivity. And they, they take a certain, take a certain, they take a certain wider scope about what objectivity means, so we don't have to worry about that. We keep going. So RCT is held up as the gold standard for rigor. And we will see what it can and can't deliver. So here's another one, high quality, independently assessed research. That's another way. Evidence-based is another one. So the more evidence you have, the more science you have, the more peer review you have, the more likely that you will have rigor. So we keep going. What can you do with it? Well, there should be an adequate evidence of the rigor of the trial. So if you want to use it to prove something, you want to use it to show that what you're doing is going to be creating reliability. So it's kind of like the progenitor, I think that's how you say it, of reliability. So a proper appreciation of these issues ensures that when equivalence trials are conducted, they reach the scientific standards necessary for reliable conclusions to be drawn. So we kind of got these nice R words that are kind of mutually informing. We got rigor, reliability. We keep going. So they permit satisfactory predictions through efficiency, usefulness, and informativeness seem to be involved as well. I think this is useful, so we can kind of go through it. We show that estimates of total numbers of neurons obtained using the fractionator are from a statistical and economical standpoint more efficient than corresponding estimates obtained using the density volume procedure. Furthermore, the use of two simple prediction methods permits satisfactory predictions. Finally, we show that assessing the reliability of estimates using a standard alternative method is neither useful nor informative. The present results may constitute a new set of recommendations for the rigorous usage of design-based seriology. Okay. So they say it's high standards. You need to do honest toil to earn that high ground. Does it have to be any toil? Probably not. So what do you do to merit that? So now we're pretty much analyzing what rigor actually means. We feel that is usually self-evident and widely acknowledged, but it's not. We have to specify, right? So, so the accumulation of scientific knowledge over time is circuitous and indirect and progresses as a result of not so invisible hands of professional skepticism and criticism. So I would say this is what we think of when we say it's self-evident. We always have to assume that maybe it's not self-evident because, you know, there are comprehensive disabilities. There are people that don't have our culture. So we say that rigor is when professional and skepticism and criticism actually cohere and create rigor. So rarely does one study produce an unequivocal and durable result. Multiple methods applied over time and tied to evidentiary standards are essential to establishing a base of scientific knowledge. So you can't have perfect rigor unless it's very small system, because, you know, in these larger systems, you have to be efficient and you can't analyze all your terms. For instance, even rigor itself, they were saying is self-evident, but what if it's not? If I don't define it, I might not have a rigorous definition of rigorous, right? So I have all sorts of things that I have to specify and I keep going. In the face of this, qualitative social scientists make valiant efforts to show that their methods also deserve this honorific label. We do have a lot of talk of it. They talk about methodological rigor. So that is, you know, really standing by your method and you do scientific experiment, really doing your statistics right, making sure that your statistics are meaningful and you don't just like say 0.001 is meaningful when the cutoff is 0.05 or something like that. You have a reason to rely on me because in your experience, I have a very high success rate, or because I am a member of a class of people, scientists who have a very high success rate. Trusting like this ducks the question of what I have done to come to the conclusion which I am recommending, including whether or not I have arrived at it rigorously. So we keep going. Why might we be tempted to privilege such reasons because of that provenance? So here's another one, properly carried out. What does that mean? Well, it means, you know, if there is a method of doing something, I followed it. But again, you have to be careful because sometimes if your method doesn't actually lead to where you want it to go, you also have to be rigorous in not following it if it doesn't actually lead to what you want out of rigor. So here is a example. Today I took a screenshot of my Google directions and they actually led me to the wrong place. And luckily I knew how to get there, but if I hadn't, I would have, you know, just been completely late for work. So part of that is I listened to the directions perfectly, but I got the wrong result. So in order to have rigor, I also have to think, is the method itself rigorous? So I might be like, well, maybe Google has a very dynamic process that is not good when captured statically. I have a lot of evidence that that is the case. They are not very good with static captures, but if your phone is on and moving, it does a good job. So even though it is usually a good method, if I want something that it's not good at, it's not going to be rigorously helpful. So we continue. It seems that for a result or a product to be described as having been rigorously arrived at, it must be the result of a process which has at least of the three following features: non-trivial, not just looking to see. So that just means just trying to find something out. This one means really checking that you have power insofar as causality, insofar as applicability, and you've tested it and it actually works. Auditable, you can ask for an account of how in a particular case the process was followed and get a comprehensive answer. Rule-based, you can write out what the process is that you have to follow. So you can ask how to follow it, whether it was followed, and how good it is at causality. The rules, no, do what seems reasonable at this point. Okay, so they're just saying have good analyticity, don't leave terms out in the blue. And the inputs, no add a bunch of sugars. So, you know, quantifiability is part of rigor. The more quantifiability a study has, the more rigor it's usually ascribed. Okay, the output, no, yep, it works. What does it work? Does it get you exactly this? Does it get you something close? Something like that. Integrable, the rules tell you how to combine the inputs and outputs, valued argument, formal features of rigor. Okay. It eliminates anxiety by promising certainty. This is what rigor does. That is its charm. If the input information is correct and the rules are followed, the output is certain, 100% sure thing. So kind of like reliability. So it looks that rigor is often stretched to cover cases like that too long. And a lot of it is stretching. So give this example of a program. So they say economics has long been dominated by mathematics, both at the theoretical level, the game theory model, and at the empirical econometric modeling. On both sides, the work is sophisticated and intricate, theorems abound. There is no want of formal rigor, but the deduction is not enough. The assumptions from what the deductions are made must be credible. Consider comments from Joshua Angrist and Jorn Stepfisk. No idea. The credibility revolution in empirical economics, how better research design is taking the con out of econometrics. With the following focus on research design, it's no longer enough to label some variables endogenous, roughly caused in the system, and others exogenous, caused outside the system, without offering strong institutional or empirical support for these identifying assumptions. Okay. So, you know, if you're saying in the same field, you might find people in your field's assumptions credible. So, you know, lawyers tend to favor other lawyers, even when it's not right to do so. Judges favor other judges, even when it's not right to do so. But correctness is both too weak and too strong to be unusable. Rigor. We continue. What's special about the methods that those economists extol is not that the input assumptions are credible on each occasion of use, but rather that the assumptions are of a type that can be made credible. Okay, so you want that gold standard of causal inference. You want to be able to actually test this. And if it doesn't work when tested, then it's not credible, whether or not somebody we are in the same field as said it. Orthogonality is supposed to be made credible in a carefully conducted experiment by random assignment and blinding. But what we have said so far is still not enough for rigor to be a useful tool. It's not enough to say correctly that the output is bound to be right, supposing the process has been properly followed and all necessary inputs are correct. And you are warranted in expecting the output when inputs are well warranted. So we just keep going. There's a lot of these different kind of just recaps. We have certifiable inputs. That is another one. We keep going. RCTs. Keep going. Here you encounter the ugly problem of the unknown unknowns. Observational studies can try to achieve real balance in a single run of an experiment by explicitly stratifying on different values of C and looking for correlations between T and O within each stratum. So they just really want to emphasize that rigor can be confounded by unknown unknowns. Okay. All right, we keep going, we keep going. You don't find the actual 8, but you do get an unbiased estimate of it. Potential outcomes equation. Let's go to the proof. The proof begins with what is known as potential outcomes equation, which is supposed to describe the site population. So here, the net effect of those for unit U are represented by, oh, I forgot that Greek word. Some Greek letter at U. All the other factors that can affect the outcome but do not interact with X in doing so are lumped together and represented by W. Yeah. So metaphysical assumptions are not contested. It's orthogonality, it follows from, right? These are all effective, so we keep going. Rigor and the RCT. Going. The research, okay. Yeah, so this is all pretty effective. And it looks like we have a pretty good checklist going on here. So is the RCT process a formally rigorous process? If it is, what does it establish for you, which you would not be able to get otherwise? Okay, so what is it doing specifically and well and singularly? Are the inputs really certifiable? What do its outputs play in helping you to do what you want to do? So it has to be, yes, it has to be non-trivial process, which is auditable and follows rules which are precise and integrable. And there is a valid statement showing that if all the input assumptions and data are correct, then the outputs must be as it is supposed to be. So that's orthogonality. Supposing that the treatment is orthogonal to the net effect of the other factors affects the outcome. Okay. So, producing reliable predictions about the effects of the program or treatment on the populations. The third requirement, we argue that more is needed than random assignment and blinding to make the input assumptions of RCTs credible, and that identifying and providing warrant for these assumptions requires knowledge that comes from outside the RCT. The causal knowledge cannot typically be attained by rigorous methods, certainly not by RCTs. So they're saying that credibility is not just from it's not just from assumptions about what we bring to it. So I can't just say I assume all lawyers are credible because I'm also a lawyer. That's kind of these assumptions that aren't always correct. For it to be credible, there has to be some sort of internal self-consistency, and also there also has to be a little bit of motive. Like, are they trying to destroy someone? Are they actually doing? Do they show evidence of actually just protecting their client in a very zealous manner? And if not, then we don't necessarily have credibility there, even though they might be a lawyer. And it's similar to something I was reading about Iran, where people were talking about intelligence theory, and they were saying the threat from Iran was getting just like ignored because people were really pandering to power, and power was saying, no, this isn't the case, this isn't the case, you're politicizing and all this kind of thing. And they did an analysis and they said, no, we're not politicizing. I know you're a big top shot, but this does actually look like a real threat. And it turned out to be a real threat, and they got a wide round of applause because they didn't pander to power. And it's the same thing with knowing what credibility is. You don't just say, this is credible, this is credible. You look at how the system interrelates and look for statistical credibility measures, as well as self-consistency and motivational factors. So we keep going. So the gold standard of a prospective blinded randomized control trial, this is the way that we kind of maximize that this is explanatory for a whole just like if I were to grab anything, I run the highest chance of it reflecting the sample if I do these. With a sufficiently large sample size, known but unmeasured covariates, known unknowns, and unknown unmeasured covariates, unknown unknowns are also balanced between the groups. So this is usually the way we get rigor, is using this, and it's causal rigor that we get using that. So they might have people drop out. That's one thing. Random assignment secures this. Again, we don't know for certain that it's random. Then, we have the very interesting part. Besides the deep metaphysical assumptions about the existence of form and the causal principles that govern the outcome for all the members of the study population, there is a practical assumption that every member of the treatment group receives their treatment and no one in the control group does. So, what they're talking about is saying that, if we can take a look at this group that got the treatment and the other that didn't, we can derive from the differences what the treatment did. But of course, causality is metaphysical. I cannot, Hume tried to really say this is where causality happens. This is where one thing causes the other. And there's impact and force and transfer, all that, but there's still this notion of, there's agentic, there's like origination, like if it just was carrying the force, did it cause the force? And did you cause the force, or you're just carrying it? So there's like a lot of questions about that. We continue. You won't know if it is important and common in both interventions. So risk of bias. Context matters. I think we can kind of skip a lot of that. So now we talk about valid. If it's valid, then conclusive reasons to believe that it will work for you is valid, right? So it doesn't have to like specify how and when it works for you, but that we're certain that it works. And we keep going. So now we finally have our full requirements: rigorous, well enough; robust enough; achieved well enough; sufficiently rigorous; not overly fastidious. And now we're getting beyond the stomach population. We continue. So we have downward inference. That means that we're going down. So that means we're formal schemes for inductive inference and for the testing of general hypothesis. So then we transfer because we say the study are similar enough that all relevant respects for this to be true. So we just say because they're similar enough, I'm just going to bring that over here. We saw that in the consumer price index. We saw that the price was similar enough that we brought it over to inflation. Whether or not that was good was a question. The literature in history and philosophy of science is rife with studies that provide concrete illustration of how little successful generation and transfer owe to rigor. So they're just saying, I can generalize without having analytical precision. I can say all trees photosynthesize without saying what tree, when tree, and how. And it's because that we're doing something different, right? So it's the nature of inference, and we can study that. So a good way to improve the reliability of predictions that a program will have the desired effect in a target setting is to model just how the program will produce that effect in that setting. So just very similar to what I've been saying before, like what this was and when. So the significant steps by which the program is to produce the outcome. Support factors. So operating in tandem with other factors. Do they need to do that? That would be your support factors. The significant steps by which the program is to reduce the outcome is our process of change. So right here, we're tracing our causal process, and we mentioned metaphysics usually does that. So then we have derailers. Those are anything that can intervene and stop or diminish a process once it is on the train. Safeguards. Safeguards can be thought as walls that prevent derailers from intruding. So you might hear in a study, you might hear about, in my study, I had this confounding factor where I was studying the effects of gender on, let's say I was studying the effects of gender on the CCP's reasoning. And then I realized that I wasn't also factoring in age. So I was talking today about how the CCP has doesn't have different genders, but they have similar ages. So we keep going. Da, 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 da. Rigorously, we have never seen any way to do the same job rigorously. All right, this is going, let's keep going. So we're not going to use that. And we don't need too much of this. It looks like everything is pretty good. So I have final remarks. Rigor is a virtue. We have looked at length at RCTs to show that it is true in one case, highly touted as a paradigm of rigor, but there is nothing particular about RCTs. Modern science has proved fairly good at securing reliability. Rigorous results are like the small rigid twigs in a bird's nest. They do the same job. Okay. And that looks like that is that for now. So I guess we can get started. Let's actually hold off on objectivity for now. We are now at where are we at? We are at I'm not quite sure, but we'll stop for now. We are done for today. Next time we'll talk about objectivity. We're just getting through the Tangle science because of the applicability and relevance to COVID-19. And I am going to continue doing final touches over here, and I will see you in the next one.